Hello and welcome to Drug Diaries, where we delve into the world of pharmaceutical breakthroughs that are changing lives. Today, we are talking about a disease that hits close to the heart. Today, we are talking about Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. Now, in order for us to understand Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, I would like you to imagine a young boy full of energy and dreams, chasing after his passion with unbridled enthusiasm. But then imagine that energy slowly fading away, dreams slipping through his fingers, and his muscles weaken and betray him. This is the harsh reality faced by those living with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a devastating genetic disorder that robs children of their strength and independence. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD, is a rare but cruel disease that affects approximately 1 in every 3,500 boys worldwide. It's characterized by progressive muscle degeneration and weakness, often leading to a loss of mobility, respiratory complications, and ultimately a shortened lifespan. Just imagine the pain and the frustration of not being able to run, play, or even hug your loved ones without assistance. But amidst this darkness, there is a glimmer of hope. Today, we are joined by Somesh Mohapatra, a brilliant researcher who has contributed significantly towards finding a treatment for DMD. His groundbreaking work, alongside a team of fellow scientists from MIT, has brought us one step closer to defeating this relentless disease. Together, they have harnessed the power of artificial intelligence and experimental chemistry to discover new sequences that could revolutionize gene therapy for DMD and beyond. About Somesh, with a career marked by a relentless pursuit of innovation and operational excellence, Somesh has honed his expertise at the intersection of cutting-edge technologies and business strategy. His journey from the hallowed halls of MIT and IIT Roorkee to key roles at Google, Caterpillar, Amgen speaks volumes about his technical prowess and his strategic acumen. Somesh is armed with a PhD from MIT, where he pioneered the optimization of materials using interpretable deep learning, and an MBA from MIT Sloan. Somesh embodies the fusion of technical depth and business acumen, and yet, amidst his professional achievements, he remains grounded, finding solace in exploring diverse cuisines, mastering the culinary arts, and staying active through sports. So join us as we delve into the remarkable journey of Somesh Mohapatra, a trailblazer who's not only shaping the future of industry but also transforming lives through his passion for innovation and his unwavering commitment to excellence. To begin with, Somesh, can you explain in simple terms what gene therapy is and how it's used to treat diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy?
Let's think of genes as instructions for building your body. When you have this instruction sheet and your body follows it to the T, then it's going to make your cells, your proteins, and everything perfectly fine. What happens in Duchenne muscular dystrophy or DMD is that some of these instructions are messed up, missing a very key protein called dystrophin needed for strong muscles. And these muscles that are made based on dystrophin are like everywhere, from your heart to your skeletal muscles for your movement, literally everything. Now, gene therapy is like a new instruction sheet. Scientists use these gene therapeutics and deliver it to the cells through either harmless viruses, peptides, or just the drug alone to deliver a healthy copy of the dystrophin gene into muscle cells. And then the muscles use these new instructions to start making dystrophin, potentially slowing down the weakness in DMD.
That's quite a complex mechanism, I believe. And there was this news about another company that came up with a treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but the effectiveness of that treatment was kind of questionable. And I think your research helped um, make that treatment more acceptable, or the adoption rate of that treatment improved significantly. So, if you could tell our audience a little bit more about what exactly happened in this research and how you were able to leverage artificial intelligence and chemistry to come up with a solution?
Um, just a quick correction. The treatment was efficient. The dosage was extremely high, which kind of made the quality of life worse. Uh, let's take a quick example on the treatment and the dosage specifically and why this research is required. When you have, let's say, a common cold, you take one dose of, let's say, Advil, Tylenol, whatever you say. And in the medicinal chemistry terms, that has 600 milligrams of paracetamol. When a dose of the gene therapeutic for DMD is given, it is given at about 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Imagine a child who is about 10 kgs, so they're getting 15 grams
Wow.
of that medicine at once, which is about 20x of what you would have with Advil. And that 600 milligram is, by the way, for a fully grown man with like 60 kgs of body weight, let's say. Imagine like just taking one entire bottle of Advil at once. You
Oh
would
my
have nausea,
goodness.
you would have vomiting, headaches, and everything. So the medicine works, but the quality of life is questionable. And that is
Right.
exactly where we said, let's tag this gene therapeutic with a peptide, a chaperone that will drag it into the cell and deliver it. And in doing so, it reduces the dose significantly and efficiency increases, the targeting increases. Now, when we think of that, peptides to deliver, peptides are like long sequences of amino acids, like about
Right.
making a string of beads. And if you think about like how many ways you can make a necklace of beads with all that string, just the combination explodes. You can just make so many combinations for necklaces, so can you make so many peptides. So we used machine learning to kind of reduce that into a palatable size so that we can make these peptides in the lab, test it out in cells, in animal models, and make them ready for clinical trials.
Right. Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. My next question is the research combines experimental chemistry and artificial intelligence. Can you walk us through the steps that are involved in developing that approach?
Sure. And this is actually a really nice step or a question to appreciate the need for the synergy between the experimental chemistry and the experimental approaches and machine learning. At first, the collaborators went ahead and experimentally screened about 600 peptides. Making one peptide can take up to 2 to 3 days, and making
Mhm.
600 of such peptides, you can just imagine it's a multi-year effort. So step one is just experimental screening, making different peptides, testing it in the cells, and getting a database which has peptide and the efficiency or the delivery efficiency mapped to it. Then we used machine learning to model that. We trained the model on the peptide representations, like making sure that the peptides are represented with their appropriate chemistry. We know how to differentiate between a bead that is, let's say, yellow in color from a bead that is blue in color. And how do we say that? In terms of chemistry, we used fingerprints. So alanine is different from, let's say, tyrosine. And with all of those representations, we made a model which could take a sequence and predict with approximately 90% accuracy how well it can deliver that drug gene therapeutic into the cell. So that was step two, making the model from the results from experimental screening to deliver it perfectly into the cells. Now that we were confident that the model works, we did two steps simultaneously. One was interpretability, and the second was about optimization. Now, one would say that like machine learning is usually a black box, so why even consider interpretability?
Yeah.
The reason for that was this was a very small data set, like 600 data points. Today, in the times of ChatGPT, we are talking like billions of documents training one large language model. So when you think about 600, we would have to be very, very careful of not overfitting anything. And ensure that the model at the same time learns the necessary chemistry and the biology that it is supposed to. So we used some methods to probe and make sure that if the model says peptide X worked well and it has an efficiency of 30x, let's say, than the drug alone, then we know
Hmm.
that peptide X has certain amino acids or beads which are making it work well enough.
Right.
In parallel, we ran optimization runs as like genetic algorithm runs, which was very much like taking one string, a random string, making one change, asking the model to predict it, and seeing like if it is better than the previous run, and then making one little change, one step at a time, over like thousands of runs for each peptide, and slowly optimizing that activity or efficiency. What would have
Right.
taken maybe years or potentially millions of years for human body to actually optimize to get to that point, just using AI and optimization algorithms, we could do it in days. So
Right.
experimental screening, machine learning, interpretability and optimization, and then we got to finally validating our sequences. From those thousands of sequences that were generated, we selected sequences that were really good, super promising sequences, like 50x the performance of what we had in the experimental data set. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that the model was able to pick up the opposite end of the spectrum, what in scientific terminology you'd call as negative control. Yes, the
Hmm.
model is able to predict really good sequences, but has the model learned how to predict bad sequences as well? Why?
Right.
We want to make sure that the model is robust. So we picked up sequences all along that efficiency spectrum and tested it. It worked.
Wow.
It worked in cells on both directions. It worked in mice. So now let's hope that the company that funded this research is going to take it in clinical trials. We have a patent application pending right now. So yeah,
Right.
a five-step process, but a fun five-step process.
Right. And how long this entire research took, approximately?
When I came to MIT, this work had been going on for 3 years approximately on the experimental
Hmm.
screening space.
Right.
I would say the machine learning took about a year and a half
Hmm.
because, again, when you are developing a model, you'd have to really make sure that the model captures the inherent chemistry. We cannot use a generic model to just model these sequences.
Right.
So developing that model, developing the representation, getting it into a state where we understand the interpretability, the pipeline, and everything, that took about a year and a half. And then
Right.
the validation with experiments, which is the costliest step in time, in terms of
Hmm.
resources, all of it took another year.
Wow.
If I were to put a total time on it, I would say about 6 years. And by the
Oh
time
my
this
goodness.
actually gets as a clinical, like an FDA approved drug, let's say
Hmm.
another 5 years at the bare minimum.
Yes. I think, yeah, that's another issue of access to these sort of innovative treatments early on, because they have to go through the several processes of approval and validation plus clinical trials and so on. So
Mhm.
it's a long drawn process. I'm trying to understand and visualize this entire process from a layman's perspective, and the amount of time that you end up spending in computer labs versus research labs. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about the practicality of conducting these sort of research, and how does an average day look like in the research world?
I would not start a day without a cup of coffee for sure.
Of course, that's
Uh,
needed.
but mornings, and again, I would answer this question from my own perspective and how I
Mhm.
try to plan the days. Different researchers have very distinct approaches. I follow what you would call a manager and a maker schedule.
Right.
A manager schedule is more like in terms of 1 hour increments, 45 minutes to
Hmm.
1 hour, depending on when you want to have meetings, when you want to have discussions. Whereas for a
Right.
maker's timeline, you need focus. you need to sit down for, let's say, in 3 hour blocks to think through the code, to think through the development, to think through what are the next steps and actually make something. So my mornings used to be usually just going through meetings with collaborators,
Right.
meetings with folks who are involved in the project, catching up with friends who are in the same PhD program over either a coffee or a breakfast. The reason that I include that as a part of the average day is because AI research or even chemistry, any research is very broad, and there are different events happening all across the domain which you need to understand, learn, and potentially integrate into your work. Like
Right.
LLMs took off when ChatGPT hit, but LLMs have been around, I would say, at least since 2018, since the BERT paper came out from Google. So, taking
Right.
all of those things into consideration, first half, coffee, breakfast meetings, and usually second
Hmm.
half is like, let's say, post lunch, 12 o'clock onwards, head down and keep coding, write it out. I'm still a pen and paper person. So
Right.
means right now I have
Yeah.
evolved to like my Remarkable, which is like a digital tool. Uh, in no way is Remarkable funding me or sponsoring me today, but I just use
Right.
that to note down my thoughts, to collect things, and just follow through the schedule. If I'm coding, it stays 3 hours of coding. After that, around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, go to the gym, play squash, maybe have another
Hmm.
1 hour, 2 hour session at the end of the day to cap it off. And then 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, typically go home, make dinner, watch a movie, read a book, and then head to bed.
Wow.
The key thing
That.
here is it's boring, but a disciplined lifestyle. And that keeps on
It
going
is.
for about 4 to 5 years.
Wow. And we are talking about at least 12 to 15 hours of work every single day.
Um, I would say the productive work is more like 5 hours,
Okay. That's not too bad.
depending on how you think about, like, is lunch at the office a part of your work? Maybe, maybe not. If
Hmm.
you ask me, would you count that when you schedule the amount of work that needs to be done? I would personally not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would schedule head down, focused work for about 4 hours a day.
That speaks volumes about your productivity. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you do your MBA and PhD at the same time, or was it?
Mhm. I did.
Would- yeah. Wow, that's
Yeah.
unimaginable. And how did you switch between these two contrasting streams of faculties or contrasting faculties? Because on the one hand, you're dealing with business strategy, and on the other hand, you're dealing with science and artificial intelligence and technology.
The way I look at it, both of them are very much interrelated. It's just that the business strategy piece starts getting into economics, and we start thinking
Hmm.
that, like, oh, if you're an MBA, maybe you're a banker. Maybe you are
Yeah,
sitting on a meeting with top management professionals and so on and so forth. Yes, that's true in some cases. But in a lot of cases, you're just trying to understand how to prioritize life. If you're talking
exactly.
like, let's say, like economics, you're trying to understand, okay, what is the return on investment for a particular project that I'm doing? For scientists,
Hmm.
you have five different ideas. Some of these are high risk, high reward. How do you evaluate it? Is that the
Yeah.
NPV or net present value calculation that you use to evaluate that? Or is it a gut feel? I have always been a person who has a gut feel, but then would like
Hmm.
data and facts to support it. So
So
the
blend
MBA
of
was more about,
intuition and facts.
yeah. So the MBA was a really nice experience of getting that breadth, adding that terminology and understanding of how do you channelize your own work, how do you structure it in a manner where it becomes more efficient, more productive, and ready to be shared with the world.
I still can't fathom the fact that you did both MBA and PhD at the same time. Well, that's another level. Coming back to DMD, I think there are a few more questions I wanted to ask. So, I now with the evolution of artificial intelligence and Gen AI stepping in, um, the possibilities are limitless now. And how do you see artificial intelligence playing a role across the value chain, right? From improving the diagnosis or improving the administration or even the treatment, like in case of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. How do you see artificial intelligence affecting all quarters of the value chain?
Going to have a significant impact across every single aspect related to delivering value to the patient. And it's important to
Right.
remember that ultimately we are providing a service which is an honor to serve the
Exactly.
patient. And when we start thinking about that end person in mind, do we think about genetic screening at first? Can we accelerate that? Earlier, when DNA was discovered or understood back in 60s, it used to take a whole lot of time, like days or even months to screen. 90s, we had the Human Genome Project, and today we can do individual screenings with 23andMe, taking a quick swab out of my cheek and sending it in a bottle, and boom, I have screened myself
Yeah.
against biomarkers, against genetic diseases. With AI, you just accelerate that entire process,
Hmm.
understanding what are all the potential biomarkers, what is the probability for each of those. Once you know that, you move to the doctor phase. Do we need an actual doctor in person visit to just quantify the
Hmm.
probability? Possibly not. It can take in patient records and their biomarkers understanding and just provide a telehealth visit very quickly with the doctor receiving a clear report of all the challenges across, let's say, rare diseases, knowing that, okay,
Right.
these are the potential things. And when there are about 10,000 odd rare diseases in the world, for a doctor to very
Yeah.
quickly remember, oh, this looks like a DMD condition, which is one of the most common rare diseases, but still, it just simplifies that equation. Then moving to treatment modalities. All of these are, let's say, genetic conditions. What Sarepta Therapeutics did was exon 51 skipping, and that's exactly what my work was dependent on. And that's just the 51st like gene that was focused on that. There's a whole lot of different things that are related to it. And a lot of those can be classified as DMD as well, or other types of muscular atrophies. So with AI, again,
Right.
you find the exact like challenge that you have and matches to where in the world is a research or a therapeutic approach being delivered and matches you to it directly. And then it goes into like
Right.
the moment we think about like manufacturing, logistics, and all of that piece of the value chain of how to deliver that drug. That's again like you think about synthesis of the drug. It's about
Yeah.
making things in your own kitchen. Like I've I'm starting to bake recently, and it just blows my mind
Oh,
that
wow.
the same baking powder on a different day acts differently. Why? Because the temperature
Really.
of the room is higher, the moisture content is higher.
Humidity.
Like,
Yeah.
dude. So
Wow.
just imagine like how much synthesis of a complex drug can be affected. So AI is again affecting every single piece of that process and
Wow.
potentially accelerating it to some degree.
Yeah, I've been reading quite a few news about the parents looking up Chat GPT, and I think this was one case that I read recently where the child was suffering with some condition, and the child was being treated by multiple HCPs, but they couldn't uh, diagnose the real condition. And then the parents went on Chat GPT. They put in all the lab results, and then um, ChatGPT suggested something, and it just triggered um, the right diagnosis, and that led to the real diagnosis of the patient. So it's really revolutionizing, and it's going to have a huge impact on how quickly and how effectively patients get diagnosed in case of rare diseases.
Absolutely.
Have you come across any common myths about uh, the field of research or the application of artificial intelligence that most people tend to carry? And you have to explain over and over that that's not how it works. Pertaining to your what you do as a researcher.
Um, I think everybody has their own perspective on like whatever they're working on, and when it comes out of their comfort zone, they try to think that maybe this is not correct, and maybe the other
Yeah.
person has to evaluate things. When it comes to AI in general, it's either that AI is going to take over everything, we are going to step on too many toes, jobs are going to be irrelevant. None of that is true. And
Yeah.
particularly in research, I've observed experimentalists, at times, they try to understand what is actually going on with the model because interpretability is a big, big thing for them. Like, if your model says something is correct, why? Because they have developed their intuition by fundamental understanding of that subject for years, and professors have spent decades thinking about it.
Right.
So, I have come across questions where people have asked me, why do you think that the model is predicting such and such things? And the moment you provide interpretability of that question, of that model, those answers tend to reduce, or like those questions tend to reduce, and people are more or less satisfied with like, okay, this aligns with our understanding, with our reasoning. And when it's something that is kind of not aligned with people's thought processes, they
Hmm.
again go back to the lab, trying to test it out. In our work ourselves, we try to do that and just make sure that we are understanding some interesting insights from the peptides that we designed. I'll give you an example on that.
Sure.
Uh, we had peptides where at the end there was a highly positive amino acid. Now the cell membrane is negatively charged. So you need a positively charged amino acid to make a Caesar and then like get in. However, that positively charged amino acid cannot be too low in its charge because otherwise that negative
Hmm.
charge does not get affected, or it cannot be too high because then it just breaks down and then like the
Right.
cell dies. So it needs to be just perfect. So we optimized to the
Right.
just perfect thing. But then what we did is we had one amino acid which enabled this end group to be flexible.
Hmm.
So this is that entire peptide. Then there is a very flexible amino acid which allows this to move freely. And the
Right.
longer we made this flexibility, it just helped that cell, helped that peptide to go in better. And that happened until a certain point where we hit the plateau. That like, okay. So one of the learnings was like, okay, so if you make a flexible anchor in the middle, like right before that end, then it is letting the peptide go into the cell better. Now, that was not a commonplace understanding in the field. So when the chemists saw
Yes.
that, they're like, this makes sense, but we would like to test it out. So they went ahead and
Right.
tested some like peptides in the lab by synthesizing them. It turned out that the machine captured that chemical insight, which was not well known in the field before that. Maybe someone
Hmm.
did it and inherently the data set had that information, but
Right.
nobody proactively added that to the model. And this goes back to your experience with people entering all their lab reports to ChatGPT and ChatGPT just
Yes.
connecting the dots and finding it out.
Right.
So people need to be assured, like told, like how these really connect, and then they're happy. They are just coming from a really nice place where they want everybody to succeed. And when it is the question of patients, when it is the question of healthcare, everybody, in my opinion, really wants to help. So if you
Yeah.
provide them the reasoning, that just works out fine.
The other very interesting piece of research that I'd heard from MIT was the use of artificial intelligence in trying to devise new antibiotics uh,
Mhm.
by using the vector tagging method, where you look at the molecule and you tag it with vectors, and then you try to develop molecules that would exactly fit in with the profile of
Mhm.
the molecules where you're trying to uh, fit the receptors. It's like the 3D modeling of the molecules, which is quite
Mhm.
fascinating as well.
Yeah. There's
Right.
works going on where if you have a protein, like very recently, Google and DeepMind released their AlphaFold 3 model, which can predict proteins with even higher accurate the structure of proteins with even higher accuracy than earlier. And they have ways that you can include small molecules, peptides, RNA, DNA, all of that into it. Now, when a lot of these basic structures, fundamental structures are being created, it's just nice to have research and approaches where you can identify those pockets which control
Hmm.
certain key events, whether those are
Right.
metabolic pathways, disease pathways, and then block it, activate it. So there's a good amount of research happening in that space.
That's a very exciting space to watch out. In the coming few years, I'm sure we'll see a lot of innovation happening in that space as well.
In that space
Uh,
and in making that space accessible to, how do you take a deep learning model that was developed and hand it over to chemists? And chemists for today, how do you take that like state of the art research and reduce the time between that getting translated for the use of a doctor? How do you make sure
yeah,
that all the people in that value chain talk to one another? And that's
yeah,
going to be critical as we move ahead.
exactly. Yeah, the access issue, and how do we improve the speed to market so that it hits the real world as quickly as possible?
Mhm.
Another question for you, Somesh. You have such an incredible track record of academic excellence, and I'm sure you have role models within your family that you looked up to and you pursued this path of excellence. If you were to give an advice to anyone who wants to pursue a career into research, what would be your advice? I'm sure a lot of young audience are watching you and they look up to you uh, and they get inspired by you constantly. What would be your advice to people who want to make it to, let's say, MIT or get into research?
That's a good question. I'd have a twofold advice here. One, concentrate on the present. Do your work diligently. It might be academics, it might be picking up a project. There's no dearth of projects on the internet. You read
Yes.
any paper that is out there on archive, you go to the end and you would see like, okay, so they are saying that these are the limitations and they have provided their GitHub link. So go to that GitHub report, try to understand what they're doing, try to implement those changes. So you can follow that in the present. And the second, look at the bigger picture. What do you want to do? Is it research? If so, why? Why do you want to study computer science? Why do you want to study chemistry? How does it inspire you? Because, well, if you are going to commit 4 years, 5 years of your life, or even more at times to a particular field, going through the grind on a daily basis, spending hours in the lab, working, then you really need to be motivated about it. And you really need to know your why. So concentrate on the present. And that concentration on the present is independent of whether you want to pursue research or do anything else. You have to do your work
Right.
diligently. You have to keep on working. And that why is important if you want to get into research. Even if you don't want to, if you want to go into another field, you should have a clear why in mind. And it can be
Absolutely. Spot
fine if
on.
you just say that, like, I want to earn a ton of money. That is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But you should have a why with you.
Absolutely spot on. I think from my experience, I can say that as long as there's passion, you'll find the purpose, or as long as there's purpose, you'll find a passion. Um, in my case, I never dreamt of pursuing a career in pharmaceuticals. And I remember I was very young and I got into pharmaceutical chemistry because one of my best friends was enrolling into that course, and not knowing where to go, I just followed him. And after completing, I kind of realized it's quite boring. I wanted to do something more glamorous. So then I started getting into advertising. I pursued education in advertising, but then it again brought me back to medical communications and healthcare advertising. And slowly, I started loving the science. I started enjoying the pharmaceuticals, and that's how now I'm deeply passionate about the world of life sciences. It's really fascinating and excites me every single day. It makes me want to wake up every morning and run to work. So sometimes you don't know where your passion lies, and you discover it as you move along and as you evolve. So that's been my case.
And I'm sure when you were doing your first pharmaceutical coursework as an undergrad, let's say, you were focused on that, you know your basics very well. But then towards the end, you decided, like, let's explore something else. And you again focused on that. Maybe like you were able to
Yeah.
focus on both of these things really well so that you were able to combine them seamlessly as you went ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you had a mentor uh, in your professional career or in your research career? And what role did they play in shaping you and guiding you? And how important do
There
you
have
think
been. Mhm.
it, yeah, how important do you think is the role of a mentor in your life?
I definitely have had mentors at, I would say, at all stages of life. Whether that was the school life, where I did not yet know what was mentorship. I had really good teachers to look up to. I had a strong backing and family to do what I wanted to. In undergrad, when that started becoming clearer, oh, well, this is what mentorship is. I had my professors, I had people from the industry um, who I talked to on a regular basis. And even now, when I'm working, I have mentors within the company and outside the company, from the alumni network, from people that I met through the career. One thing that mentors bring to the table is they are taller than you in general in terms of
Yes.
seeing what lies ahead.
Yes.
And if you have a
Yeah.
very experienced person as a mentor, then they can literally like draw out the pathway that you would be
Yeah.
going through in the immediate term, point out the challenges, and give you feedback on what those challenges are, how do you need to go through them. And it can be
Yeah. Very
professional
well.
and personal, both.
Absolutely. Spot on. Okay, another question. At what time of the day do you get most of, or let me put it this way, at what time of the day do you get your best work done? Are you a morning person or you're more of uh, an evening person?
Um, I'm a work hours defined person that way. Earlier, when I used to
No
work,
extremes.
maybe if it is a 9 to 5 work, right now at Caterpillar where I'm working, it's usually a 7 to 3, 8 to 4 kind of a role. I'm okay
Mhm.
with that. I have always worked well when you have things in terms of hours defined.
Right.
I like my personal space, which is like, let's say, reading a book. And I'd be reading
Yeah.
like things ranging from history to nonfiction, or maybe fiction at times, which is a rare thing to do, but I like to have that defined as well. So whenever my calendar is blocked, I will work well,
Mhm.
irrespective of the time of the
All
day.
right. So you prefer structure in your routine. You prefer um a specific uh, sort of schedules for every activity, and yeah, that's your preference.
Preferably, preferably. That
Yeah.
does not happen always, but I try to try to make a structure as well as I can and follow that.
Now, on the topic of books, if you were to recommend three of your favorite books to the audience, what would those be?
That's a tough question. um,
It could be fiction or non-fiction.
I, uh, I would say I don't have any favorites in terms of books. That is how I would put it. I can recommend what I'm reading right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
I'm reading The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting concept as to how everything that we do has obstacles, and you'd have to pass through the obstacles to make the way. This is inspired by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and it
Mm-hmm.
has examples from the entire spectrum of history until today and has clear approaches of how to act through these obstacles. So, that is one book that I'm currently reading, and I can definitely recommend that. But yeah, in terms of books, I would say I don't have any specific favorites. But
Right.
yeah, I don't really prefer a genre over the other. But if you ask me, like, when you are stuck, where do you go for advice, for direction? I'm a deeply spiritual person. So
Oh,
anytime I'm stuck, it would be the Bhagavad Gita that I would turn to
oh
for
one.
advice.
Wow, that's profound and very well said because Bhagavad Gita has got answers to everything that we can possibly think of, and yeah, it's probably the best read I can recommend too.
No, I was just mentioning on the note of Bhagavad Gita, since we mentioned, and I believe there's a very particular shloka or paragraph that I always go back to, and
Mhm.
that is chapter 2, the seventh shloka. It is Karpanya Dvesha Pahat Svabhava Prachami Twang Dharma Samudha Cheta Yat Shreya Shanishchetan Brihitan Me Shishyastehang Sadhimang Twang Prapadnama. And what that means is God, or like Sri Krishna, who is the God in this case, Arjuna is telling that I do not know what is right or wrong, and I'm confused. I do not understand that you are asking me on this battlefield to fight and potentially kill my kith and kin, like people who are my brothers, my grandfather on the other side. So I'm confused. I do not understand the difference between right or wrong here. So I request you to guide me so that I can make the right decision. And I surrender before you. I believe life is like that. There's no right or wrong in a lot of cases. And it's just a matter of trying to understand, surrender before the Lord, and see where it takes.
And metaphorically, would you call this surrendering to the process, or to the nature, or to the flow, or would you say
Um,
surrendering to the divine force?
so surrendering has a paradoxical meaning for me. I write as well. So
All right.
I I wrote a poem a while ago where there was a phrase called as I submit with authority before you. And that would be my interpretation of this surrender. Because when you think about it from the context of Bhagavad Gita as well, Arjuna tells this in the second chapter, and the Bhagavad Gita goes until 18 chapters.
Yes.
So Arjuna surrenders before Sri Krishna early on, but he then questions every little thing that Sri Krishna has to say. So he submits, but with authority that he can
Mm.
ask why. And for me, the definition of surrender is that I consider you as my mentor, as a friend. I surrender to hear to you, to help me in this, to instruct me on how to do it. But at the same time, I hold the authority to question every answer that you give me. So it's not
Wow.
surrendering or submitting to the process, to the divine forces or anything. It is submitting to follow the path, but at the same time, question everything that is on there.
You continue to challenge and you continue to question, but you're also surrendering at the same time. That's paradoxical, but that's how it should be, I guess. So you mentioned you write. Wow, you are a multifaceted person. You've got many talents. So tell us about your writing. Is there something that you're currently working on?
Um, Previously, it used to be poems and blogs.
Mhm.
Right now, I just write in the journal, but like, okay, this is
Okay.
how things have been, this is how things are going. Um, I've been working on a couple of ideas, but nothing finalized yet.
Well, we look forward to reading your work someday. Okay. Another question. What's one lesson your job or your career has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in their lives? It could be a lesson from a setback or a failure or an occasion when you faced with a challenge and you bounced back. You learned something critical and you realized that this is what was missing, and then you bounced back.
I'd go back to 2018 when we were building the company MatSci AI. 2018, to give you a quick
Mhm.
reminder, that was the year of GPT-2.
Yes.
So, way before GPT-3 and ChatGPT came, that was the time when this was done. And at that time, it was very new. People wanted to do a lot of things with GPT, but they did not understand, they just appreciated it. So, we as a new company took this and went to a company, uh, one of our first customers, and presented to do their document processing and automation using that. We quoted them something like $1.5 million in development, and we were
Hmm.
straight away said, nope, we are not giving you this deal, even though it was
Right.
solving their process. That was one of the first setbacks in the company. We had several ups and downs later, but that was one of the first setbacks. One thing that happened though there was the CEO took me aside. He's a great friend today. He took me aside and said, Sumesh, you are a startup. And we don't we cannot invest that much in you to build something. I trust you as a person, but it's hard for me to convince the company as well. So I can give you something within 200K. Can you build a
Hmm.
solution? I'm like, but the solution that we're proposing is going to give you 99% accuracy and so on. It's like, I don't think we need that. We'd be happy with the 80%. So, couple of lessons there. One, understanding what the person in the front actually needs. And that is
Yes.
irrespective of your professional, personal, every single interaction. You need to understand what the person in the front is actually looking for. Second,
Yes.
more on the professional side, you don't need the best technology or the solution that you have in mind. It does not need to be the best, the state of the art. It should solve the problem, period.
The
And
MVP.
absolutely. That applies to again personal, professional, both. We were on the market to buy like a vacuum cleaner the other day. One of the things that we saw was a top end company, uh, wireless vacuum, amazing stuff, has a light and fixtures, everything. And then another that was like kind of like a run of the mill product. You can get it for like $50 versus $1,500. We were like, what exactly we need, why we need it, how much are we going to use
Hmm.
it, and what is the amount that we are willing to pay for that right now. The moment we answered all of that, we were ready with the answer and we went with neither of the options but something in the middle. So the lesson from that interaction is number one, understand what the person in the front needs. Second, solve accordingly.
That's a very good strategy. Somesh, I also noticed recently that you've been working with a lot of young students and mentoring them and trying to help them with their academic uh, work. Can you share some more information about that? And how do you like that experience of working with younger people? What sort of difference that you see in this? Although there isn't much difference between you and them, but do you see any difference in the approach, difference in how they see things?
I would say I'm a very selfish mentor where I'm looking for reverse mentorship in general. Even though
Oh.
I completed my undergrad about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, the world has changed a lot. We didn't have ChatGPT while growing up. We didn't have access to a whole lot of the technology. The younger generation is far more capable, far more focused. They know how to prioritize the work and themselves. If I were to go to my father and say, like, okay, what did you do today? And how long did you stay in office? He might just say, even today, that he's returning from office at 9 p.m. after starting from home
Wow.
around 8 a.m. If I ask my younger brother the same question or a cousin the same question, they'd be like, oh, I went to the office around 10 a.m. and I was back by 6. And I know he must have received a promotion very recently or a raise and things like that. So would you say my
Yeah.
dad is a bad worker or my younger brother is not a good employee? None of that is correct.
I
It's
think,
just that definition. Mhm.
yeah, I was just going to say that
Yeah.
the definition of productivity has changed, and I think
Yes.
we see that in elder generation that they somehow feel guilty if they go home early. If they finish work at 5, they're like, am I doing something wrong? How can I finish work so early? I
Mhm.
should at least put in an hour extra. And they would end up
Mhm.
doing work till 6 o'clock. But I think
Mhm.
today it's all about being productive. And if you're able to achieve your task or your goals within a few hours' time, that's good enough. It's not about the
Mhm.
number of hours, but it's about what you produce in those hours.
And the younger generation has a
And
very clear sight of that.
yeah,
They know how to take the long weekends as vacations, and they are
oh
not
yes,
feeling guilty that they are taking vacation, because if the company says that you have 20 vacation days, they would make sure that they cover 20 in the year. And I can say that my dad has maybe 100 plus vacation days remaining, and he has
oh
already
wow,
reached the cap when he cannot take any more. But yeah, I think I learn a lot from the younger generation, and I appreciate them giving me the opportunity to mentor them.
I'm sure they are equally privileged to have you as their mentor, and it's they're learning a great deal from you and from your experience and from your knowledge. I think every young person would like to have a mentor like you.
I'm honored for that statement and for the opportunity as well. Right now, I'm starting another stream for mentorship, and this is a more directed one,
Hmm.
which is geared towards high school students.
Right.
The reason for that is very recently they started the International Olympiad for Artificial Intelligence.
Hmm.
So, International Maths Olympiad existed, International Chemistry, Biology, all of those existed earlier. So,
Right.
recently they have started the International AI Olympiad as well, and that is for high
Hmm.
school students. Plus, NeurIPS, which is the topmost conference today in the world for AI, has a new track for high school students to submit papers. So I'm
Right.
excited about talking to high schoolers interested in AI, helping them shape their thoughts, shape their projects, their ideas into tangible outcomes where they
Hmm.
can present it either at the Olympiad or at the foremost venue for AI research.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast right now would like to reach you and would like to have a conversation and to try and seek your guidance and help. How can people reach you? If you can share your email address where they can write to you.
Sure. Yeah, email is honestly the easiest way. I'm not that active on cell phone. Kaushik, you and I went through conversations on LinkedIn and cell phone.
Yes.
My WhatsApp messages are a couple of days delayed. LinkedIn is usually within the same day. So, from that standpoint, email digital communication is faster. You can email me at picklesomesh@gmail.com.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Somesh. I'm sure you will receive a lot of emails after this episode. So, Somesh, I really want to thank you for taking time to be our guest today. Your insights, your expertise, and your passion have truly illuminated the path towards innovation and discovery. And thank you for taking time to join us, for sharing your invaluable knowledge with our audience. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on Drug Diaries. and we are immensely grateful for the work you're doing to drive positive change in the world. We wish you continued success in all your endeavors, both professional as well as personal.
Thank you, Kaushik. The pleasure is all mine.
It was lovely talking to you. I hope you found this information helpful. Before we wrap up today's episode, I would like to extend a special invitation to all the innovators and trailblazers in our audience. If you are working on something truly groundbreaking, whether it's in the field of medicine, technology, AI, commercial, patient safety, product engineering, medical regulatory affairs, or any other domain, and you would like to share your work with a wider audience, we want to hear from you. Drug Diaries as an initiative is committed to shining a spotlight on the incredible work being done by visionaries like you. So if you have a story to tell, an innovation to showcase, or a breakthrough to unveil, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Simply drop me an email at drugdiariespodcast@gmail.com and let's start a conversation about how we can feature your work on an upcoming episode. That's all for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in to Drug Diaries. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep changing the world one breakthrough at a time.